Good afternoon, everybody. I am Todd Obert, President and CEO of Productive Corporation, joined alongside me here virtually and philosophically, Carl Ackerman, Principal Product Manager from Sophos. We are going to talk about Sophos Next-Gen Endpoint. We are going to see the product. We're also going to talk about kind of where this fits in to the threat landscape and how it helps to keep you safe. But before we do that, we will be meeting Productive in 1 minute or less. If you've been to our events, you know how we do it. We like to be more about content and less about fluff. To that end, we'll get through all of those pesky slides quickly and then turn the microphone over to Mr. Content himself, Carl Ackerman. So with that, let's meet Productive in 1 minute or less. Who is Productive, you ask? Well, I'm so glad, even though you're muted, that you asked me. Productive is a company that provides security solutions for mid-sized companies. We have a specialized team that can help you with technical and licensing questions so you don't have to navigate that World Wide Web all on your own. We also do front-end security assessments, penetration tests to help you define and figure out what your security posture and position should be. We also do configuration assistance and UTM implementation and optimization. In addition, we produce a lot of content like this: educational product content, educational topics about mid-market security. All of that can be found at productivecorp.com/content, as well as our YouTube channel. The bottom line is we have the resources to help you, whether that's implementation, assessment, licensing, or optimization services. We can do it all. Help at productivecorp.com, 800-726-4099. Give us a call. Let us know how we can help. One of the ways that we help is by working with our great partners like Sophos to put on content that we feel is very relevant to you. And if you have been paying attention to what Sophos has been doing lately, they have really been pushing the vision and the leadership execution out in endpoint and gateway. And today, Carl Ackerman is going to be talking to us about next-gen endpoint, right? Which is, we're going to talk about today's security environment. He's going to talk about what's happening in the products, as well as how you would put it in your environment. I think we're going to spend a little time taking a look at the product. So if you would put your hands together, let's give a warm virtual round of applause for Carl Ackerman. Carl?
Thank you very much, Todd. I really appreciate the time today to talk to everyone. If you can just transfer control of the meeting over to me, I'll get on with talking about what we're seeing.
Done.
Absolutely. Here we go. So for the agenda today, everyone you can see this, right, Todd?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I'll get started. What we're going to cover is a couple of things on what Sophos is seeing in the threat landscape and how that's driven our development of a next-generation product. So I'll talk in detail about what Sophos Intercept is and how that can work either alongside a competitive AV product or get integrated with Sophos Endpoint Advanced for a single management point to really look at how we're going to go about addressing the next generation of threats. So from a perspective of looking at how the cyber criminals have been doing, they had a extremely good year last year. This year is shaping up to be much the same on their ability to successfully penetrate environments. So we see this all the time in the news briefs. Organizations are getting breached. I think one thing important to note is even though on this we're primarily seeing large organizations or government agencies getting hacked, the reality is the criminal syndicates have industrialized the malware delivery tools to the point that every organization is under risk. And I think that's most apparent in what we're seeing for the ransomware spike. So everyone's probably familiar with ransomware. The adversary tricks an end user, usually through a spearfish attack, to click on a URL, and the next thing they notice is all of the productivity documents on their device are encrypted, and they're being instructed on how to pay a ransom. Last year, ransom payments were $325 million and nearly 100,000 victims a day. This year, the FBI is expecting the ransom payments from this type of malware to grow to $1 billion. And this was sort of guiding us when we looked at how do we want to address what's happening in this threat space. And is really the foundation of what the core problem is with the growth of malware and the diversification of the targets that the enemies are going after. When we look at why organizations get breached, it really comes down to the fact that the adversaries, the criminal syndicates, have gotten extremely professional in how they build malware. So it's everything from getting better at social engineering, so you're no longer going to get an email from a Nigerian prince asking you to share your credit card information. You may get an email that looks like it's coming from your financial department saying, take a look at this spreadsheet. And in reality, that spreadsheet contains an exploit kit that's going to infect your machine. So the types of attacks have gotten more sophisticated.
And they're doing this, Carl. They're doing it right for mid-market all the time, or even smaller organizations. We've been called, we know some other mid-sized firms that, you know, they call in, they find out, they know what kind of levels pass. So if somebody has a 10, 20K, 30K signing authority, they have figured that out before they launch that attack.
Absolutely. With $1 billion in revenue this year, the criminals aren't just pocketing that money and going away. They're investing it and making more sophisticated attacks and weaponizing those attacks. So when we look at the amount of malware that we see, we collect almost 400,000 unique malware samples a day. And the reality is most of those malware samples, 75% of them, are unique to the organization in which they're targeted. And what this leads to is an understanding of how are the adversaries able to do that. That's an enormous amount of malware, and it's almost all of it being unique in some degree or another. What they've done is they've built malware as a service platforms. So these are platforms that a wannabe criminal can go out and rent or purchase. They'll pay an actual monthly subscription fee to get access to a toolkit like this. So this is Black Hole. It was brought down a few years ago out of Russia, but we were able to get some screenshots of it and sort of decompose it. And you can see from a tool, it tells them the number of endpoints that they've infected, which geographic locations they're in, and the types of exploits that they've paid for access to. Now, as an adversary with this kind of a tool, you then pick what type of malware you want to deploy and rent a botnet to go and deliver the spam messages or to take down a website that people frequently browse to and put in a drive-by exploit. The tools have gotten very sophisticated, and the attacks have gotten, substantially more successful in a number of ways. The other thing we've seen is the growth in zero-day exploits. So this gets into what are we trying to address with next generation. And one of the things we wanted to address was, can we address what's happening with the patch problem and the exploits that are hitting organizations? And what we've seen is the adversaries actually mine the patch data. So there's almost 7,000 patches released annually that are security related. And what would happen is, Microsoft had Patch Tuesday. So the adversaries would mine the security patches that come out and go ahead and write an exploit to take advantage of the vulnerability. So we ended up with Exploit Wednesday. And the reason they're able to do this and do it effectively is they know that it's almost 200 days between someone providing a vulnerability assessment and the patch actually getting deployed on the average system. So they've got a significant window of opportunity to take advantage of these vulnerabilities with exploits. And this was something we specifically wanted to target with Sophos Intercept. The other challenge we see is organizations, and I think this is especially apparent in the mid-market, is to stand up a security operations team that's going to continuously monitor what data is coming into and out of the organization with a SIM product is extremely expensive, hard to find the skilled staff to do that, and often, most of the time, those organizations end up chasing things that are anomalies as opposed to threats. So we wanted to address this aspect as well. What we've introduced with Sophos' next-generation endpoint protection is 100% signatureless, and it's designed to go after a couple of areas which we're seeing the most aggressive malware development. We wanted a solution for ransomware attacks. We wanted to address the problem we were seeing in exploits, And because malware is often found that's already begun execution in the environment, we wanted to provide a detailed incident response report, and we have a forensics malware removal tool available now. So Sophos Clean, I think for those familiar with what products are out there, Malwarebytes has something similar to Sophos Clean. It'll examine the system in a more rigorous detail, provide you some reports on it, and actually return the system to a working order very effectively. So Sophos Clean is available today. Sophos Intercept comes out in September 15th. It's in beta right now. And as I go through this in detail, a couple of important things to note. Sophos Intercept as a standalone product can run alongside a competitive AV product. If you run it alongside the Sophos Central endpoint, the advanced endpoint that's managed from Sophos Central, it integrates into a single product and provides all of the detection capabilities of our advanced endpoint with the new next generation endpoint. So digging into a little more, go ahead.
So that'll be, right, that intercept, so it'll be one interface if you if you're using the Sophos endpoint, it just becomes part of the console, right, and additional functionality. But if you are in the middle of, say, you're using a different endpoint and you want to take advantage of the capabilities of Intercept, which you may, right, you can buy that and still run it as a standalone.
That's correct. So if someone already has Sophos Central managed endpoints and they're interested in what I'm about to go over and adding that to it, it's an additional license. It's the same endpoint gets deployed, so some additional services start up on the endpoint, and you have a new centralized management console.
But it's just one. It's part of the same deployment, right, or push, and it's all integrated. So the client thinks of it as one thing with additional capability, right? From a management standpoint, it's one thing. Correct?
Absolutely. That's correct.
Yep.
So when we looked at ransomware in particular, today the Sophos endpoint has a variety of models to try and protect you from ransomware. Everything from preventing you from going to known malicious websites with Web Protect to an on-device emulator where we'll detonate an executable and examine its contents to say, hey, this is something I can recognize as malware, I want to stop it. Most of the detection techniques in this space looking for ransomware are really driven off of understanding the malware samples themselves. And we realize there's something that all ransomware has to do that has nothing to do with how it's being delivered or how it's being executed. All the ransomware has to perform is it needs to encrypt files on the device. So we've created a behavior analytic that sits at the file system and process layer. And we monitor all processes, regardless of its origin, and say, if that process is rapidly encrypting files on the disk, I want to take action. And what I'll do is I will examine that process to determine whether it's an authorized business application. If it's not, I'll leave the process isolated, and because I've had to observe it encrypting files, I will take a cached copy of that I've stored earlier and roll back to a pre-encryption state. So this is a backstop core behavior analytic that's just sort of a blanket protection against ransomware attacks. And when we tested this, so we built this behavior model, we tested it in labs against the hundreds of millions of malware samples we have, and against all the variants of ransomware that we were seeing. And we turned off every other detection capability in the product and tested just the behavior analytic. It caught all but a handful of particular ransomware attacks. The ones that were missing were tied to rootkits, and we've since updated the product for that. So what we have right now with CryptoGuard, again available in September, is a very successful capability for detecting and rolling back ransomware attacks that are happening. So that's a core component of Sophos Intercept. The next problem we wanted to look at was a bigger set of problems. We wanted to address the fact that the traditional antivirus vendors, Sophos included, are trying to process and understand 400,000 malware samples a day. And we do that with a number of rules that allow for those samples to be polymorphic. We do it with a whitelist lockdown capability on servers, heuristics, signatures make up about 1% of what we do. When we look at the problem, though, of where the adversaries are successful, we see that data breaches leverage exploits. So 90% of data breaches are going to leverage an exploit. 70% of companies have had a data breach in the last year. And today, the products on the market that are sort of trying to detect this are the security incident and event monitoring, endpoint detection and remediation, and some of the new products around user and entity behavior analytics. These tools tend to create more questions than answers. So they're detecting anomaly and they're notifying a security ops person. We wanted to enter the EDR space, and we will with Intercept, but we still wanted to dig a little deeper on this and say, can we solve this problem better than just detecting anomaly? And what we realized is with 6,800 vulnerabilities per year, organizations are trying to solve this with patches. So the exploits are leveraging vulnerabilities. The number of vulnerabilities is increasing per year. But what they actually have to do is they need to perform an exploit method. And those methods are things like stack pivots or heap sprays or process hollowing and buffer overflows. And we said, can we get a product that just detects whether an exploit is happening, regardless of whether it's an over-the-air attack on an authorized process or a new piece of malware that's somehow gotten to the point of running. If I can detect an exploit, I can stop the majority of these data breaches. So Sophos Intercept introduces a comprehensive set of exploit detection techniques. And some of the background on where the statistics came from, if people wanted to look those up. So Gartner published in 2014 the information on vulnerabilities. White Hat Security pegged the days between a vulnerability and a patch being available at about 200 days. And NSS Labs has indicated that 90% of data breaches are caused by exploit kits. What Sophos did when we wanted to look at comprehensive exploit prevention is we looked at what was available in the market. And a lot of universities have built tools to detect particular exploit methods. When we looked out there, there's a set of tools from Microsoft EMET, but it's not complete. Malwarebytes had a couple of capabilities. Palo Alto bought Cyvera primarily for the exploit detection capabilities, but again, it's not complete. And we found a company called Surfright. And what Surfright had that no one else did was a comprehensive list with the ability to detect the exploits. And because exploits are so rare, and new exploit techniques, you get maybe one new major exploit technique a year, we bought them and we've integrated that into Sophos Intercept. So that forms the core signatureless detection capability, and it's no longer based on any type of file analytics. It no longer requires a payload to be delivered to the device and put in a sandbox or evaluated with an emulator. There's no complex mathematics in analyzing an executable. It says, if I see someone performing an exploit, I've got an advantage. No legitimate business applications perform exploits. So if I can see an exploit happening, I know it's malware. Yes?
So are there other components that are part of Intercept that weren't part of Surfright? I guess I was under the understanding that Intercept is Surfright.
Oh, there are. This is the next piece I wanted to talk to.
Good. Surfright, I'm the setup man.
Absolutely. So Surfright gave us this great capability to detect exploits, and that's already deployed through Surfright's Hitman Pro Alert. It's now part of Intercept. The other thing we wanted to understand was that problem with SIMs, where you can detect something strange but you really don't know what happened. And because exploits are happening from malware that's actually executing in the environment, we think it's incredibly important for when we see a detection of running malware or even the detection of a block event, where say we block someone from going to a malicious website, we wanted to answer some questions. And we wanted to answer those questions in an automated way. So what we've introduced with Intercept is a Sophos data recorder. This gets into similarities with other endpoint detection and remediation products. The Sophos data recorder sits on the Windows endpoint and listens to 5 tracks of memory. What's happening at the 5 tracks of data, what's happening for the live memory, registry, network, file system, and process activity. It stores about 30 days worth of data on the device. It's 100 megabytes worth of disk storage. And we needed to make sure it was performant. So when we first built the models here, there's about 15,000 events a second that throw off of an endpoint when you're listening to these tracks. We filtered that down to just the information required to do something along the lines of a root cause attribution. So if we see something bad, we want to ask the data recorder and an algorithm we built to track it back to its origin. And I'm about to show you what that looks like and then show you some screenshots. So today, an endpoint antivirus product, Sophos included, may detect that bob.exe is malware. It was convicted because it reached to a command and control site. A memory scan from Sophos confirmed that it's malware, and we've gone ahead and blocked that and removed it. That's where most antivirus products start and stop. They can catch malware, and they can probably remove it. What we wanted to do, though, is because we have the data recorder, we wanted to see how did we get to the point where bob.exe was actually reaching out to command and control. And we see by asking the data recorder that it was downloaded from fred.com, a suspect URL, and written by iExplorer. iExplorer was actually launched by Adobe. Adobe doesn't normally do this, so there's probably an exploit in Adobe, but we're still not at the root cause. The Adobe process was reading a PDF that came in on a USB device. So that this ability to automatically create a root cause attribution is very new to the market. And if you were to do this with a SIM or another EDR product, it's probably hours or days to get to this level of detail. And with SIMs, they don't have access to what was happening on the endpoint. So a lot of this would just be guesswork. But we're able to automatically determine the root cause and make some recommended security posture changes. So we might recommend turning on device control in this case. This gives us a timeline of events that we can display to the administrator. But because we were able to track backwards in time, we also have the ability to track forward. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we see that in addition to bob.exe being downloaded by iExplorer, another executable also got downloaded, a data collector. And because we're watching what happens at the file system, we can identify business files that it was rummaging for. So the ability to provide a comprehensive root cause attribution and associated suspect elements is one of the really powerful capabilities of Sophos Intercept. And it doesn't require a very high-paid security operations specialist spending hours trolling through the data. All of this shows up immediately in an incident response report. So what you'll see in the new product, if you purchase Sophos Intercept, you'll get this threat analysis tab. And what that gives you is the ability to see what was found, business files that may have been put at risk, the device and the user that were involved, the dwell time of the adversary. So when did the detection event happen and when was the root cause attribution? And in this case, we're looking at a Chrome browser exploit. You'll get a list of recommended actions. You'll get an activity record where you can take some notes if you're doing an investigation. We'll also automatically set a priority based on the complexity of the information we've collected and the data files at risk. From here, you can go to an artifacts page and see all of the process and registry events that were collected. Here I've filtered it to just the business files, and we see that this Chrome browser exploit was somehow involved with a salaries document. And I might want to then visualize the threat, and I can get something like this. So on the left here, we have Chrome, and the process is required for Chrome to start up. You'd be able to look at the IP addresses involved with that connection, and you can see what happened was Chrome dropped a file and executed it. That file started a process that did data collection. The files were copied from here and put into a zip file. This process then reached out to command and control where we convicted it. So you have the IP address of the command and control server. In the meantime, it was presenting a decoy document to the end user. What's unique about this, or what's I think very compelling about it, is this device, when we detected the malware on it, was probably doing lots of other things. The user may have had Instant Messenger open. They may have been editing a PowerPoint and crafting an email. They also browsed to a site where this exploit happened. All of the activity that's not associated with the threat has been filtered out, and you get this kind of a view. So real quick, what I'll do is I'll bring up the actual console, and I'll show you what one of these looks like for a ransomware attack. So here we can see the dashboard that's available in Sophos Intercept, or in this case, the Intercept plus Endpoint Advanced. If I look at my threat analysis, I have a number of things where I've been detecting command and control, some ICAR tests. I think down here we have a number of exploits, so stack pivots.
Hey, Carl, on that home page of the interface, the dashboard, is that, did you enable the news section, or is that what I saw? There was like Epic something?
On the main dashboard?
Yeah, global security news. Is that something you configure? How does that?
I think this automatically shows up. It's just an RSS feed to the console, but I haven't looked at trying to configure it.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah, we don't have ours. Well, we don't have ours rolling. I mean, we have the dashboard. We just don't. We don't get the feed on the bottom. So I didn't know, is that customizable, or is that you guys are deciding here's what kind of news is coming through, or whatever?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's customizable or not. My guess is it probably is, but through a configuration file as opposed to the console.
Totally.
On the threat analysis, if I look at the last attack, I can see a CryptoGuard ransomware attack. And here I see the 26 business files that were involved. So often attacks will have a number of things that are involved. Registry keys, network connections that happened. My business files, though, a number of JPEGs that were part of a decoy, and then here's some of the test files that I had it encrypting. Sort of hard to understand, but with Visualize it becomes much easier. So here we see a PowerPoint exploit that happened. It was attacked by my test utility, and the test utility was downloaded from Explorer. And here's the files that were actually impacted. And I can see up here, those are the test files that I built the ransomware to go after. So this is the ability to actually get some details of what happened and how that attack progressed and when it was stopped. From a capability perspective, we think it really goes a long way to answering some of those critical questions, especially if you're trying to protect your environment and you found running malware or malware that was detected on a scan. Sophos Clean, it can run standalone alongside a competitive piece of software or will automatically get kicked off by Sophos Intercept. It provides a deeper report on the malware components that were found, and it rolls back Windows system resources so the machine's in a healthy state. All up, what this adds up to is some of the core capabilities. Up above this line is what Sophos Endpoint Advanced includes, and here I've shown file encryption. So our endpoints, as you may be aware, work with synchronized security. And what synchronized security allows is the contextual sharing of threat between Sophos products. So in this example, someone has file encryption also deployed on their device, and if the endpoint believes it's under attack, we'll actually remove the file encryption keys until the endpoint's in a healthy state. Synchronized security also works with the XG firewall, so if we see threat happening at a firewall, we tell the endpoint and it's able to do a deeper analysis. But all of these capabilities for exposure prevention, download reputation, the runtime analytics, the heuristics, malicious traffic, these are basic capabilities in Endpoint Advanced. What we've added is the exploit prevention. So that's the 25 or so exploit methods that we're able to detect generically. The behavior analytic for ransomware protection, the data recorder, the ability to build that incident response report automatically, and forensics malware cleanup and recommended security actions. The way this looks from a product perspective, here on the left you can see a number of core capabilities across a prevent, detect and stop, and respond skewing. So web security, for instance, this is preventing you from going to known malicious websites. That's included in Endpoint Standard and Advanced, and with Intercept it's also available, but if you were to purchase Intercept standalone, that's a traditional AV capability. Intercept standalone includes browser exploit prevention, malicious traffic detection, synchronized security, the anti-ransomware capability, the exploit prevention, root cause analytics, and the malware removal. What we'd anticipate is companies that already have Sophos Endpoint Advanced and want the threat analysis or the behavior detection for ransomware or exploits would purchase a license for Sophos Intercept, and then you'd manage it from that console I was just showing you. So it's the integrated console of both products. I think with this, we're ready for a couple of questions if more have come in.
Sure. So question on this, the licensing, right? So you can go, there's two ways you guys can go, right? Per user or per device. You can also do that. There's certain environments where guys have shared workstations or dedicated things, right? So you guys you do have the ability to split it up, right? I mean, overall I like the per user concept, right? Because most it's where we live in a world of one-to-many, but in those cases that it makes sense to go per device, you guys are also able to license it that way, correct?
Yeah, we have flexible options with sales. The way the product is designed is the design is intended to count a user, and the user can have more than one device. But we
Yep.
know we run into organizations that have very different kinds of usage for the product, so that can be accommodated through our sales structures.
Okay. Perfect. And I guess the other question is, you know, you got all this great stuff coming out. Maybe it's not fair to say, hey, what's next? Because all this stuff is just coming out. But what else to expect down the line? You know, maybe the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to talk to that. So some of the stuff that's coming is what we want to do with Sophos Intercept V2. So in V1, we get this ability to do the detailed root cause analysis, and here's the slide for that.
Yep.
What we see often in the EDR space, the folks like a Carbon Black or a Tanium that are targeting security operations centers, is a desire to hunt for adversaries. So take an IP address and say, has anyone in my environment talked to that IP address? Or in more advanced attacks, often we see an adversary take advantage of one machine and then move to another where they launch their additional attacks. So that hunting capability is coming in V2, probably 6 to 9 months out. And the way that would work is, imagine this IP address here that reached out to command and control. If that IP address were another device in your network, we'd actually follow this threat chain to the other device and show what was happening on that other device. Or the ability to say, this file that was downloaded, is that on other machines in my network? So you'd automatically get information saying, yes, it's on 4 other devices, and it's active, actually running on one of those. So let me bring up the console, and we'll show some of those in more detail.
Okay.
So here, for instance, we can see some details on this file, where it's located. This is where we would also show it's on these 2 files are on 3 other devices, and we'd identify those devices. So that ability to automatically track things laterally through the environment would be included.
Yep.
And the way this gets controlled, just so we can take a look at that, is through policies. And policies have gotten a little richer in this version of the product than in earlier ones. So we've opened up control at the individual threat model level. So live protection, that's primarily used for allowing the endpoint to automatically ask Sophos Labs for an additional set of data on this. So we process probably 600 million live lookups per day at Sophos. And if you've enabled live protection, it allows the endpoint to say, I'm seeing a file that I'm suspect on. Does Sophos Labs have a conclusive definition of whether this is bad or not? So those live lookups, what they're doing is they're looking against what's called the current champion model. And the way Sophos builds models for all of these detection methods is on the endpoint we've published what we think are the best models for detecting the malware. But because we're processing so many samples per day, we'll often find a variant of malware that's being missed by the current champion model. And what happens then is we'll automatically build a challenger model and run it through efficiency and performance tests and false pos testing. If it passes that, it's the new champion model and it's made available to live protect. The endpoints pick up the new champion models about every 4 hours, but live protect sort of gives them an early look at them. So we recommend everyone run with live protection on because you're able to take advantage of the most recent threat models. You then have real-time scanning, so this is scan on access or on write. And then looking at the downloads from payloads, blocking access to malicious websites. All of this is sort of advanced endpoint. The stuff that's new is what's coming in runtime protection. So down here you can see where I can turn on or off CryptoGuard. CryptoGuard, by the way, what we've seen with that, so we've been in beta now for a couple of months. So we have about 3,000 endpoints running Sophos beta. And we've been catching real ransomware and real exploit attacks. What's interesting about it is we're running that detection on the endpoint. So its local drives are protected, but also any share-mounted drives are taking advantage of this protection. We'll have a version of the CryptoGuard that'll run on servers, probably in the December-January timeframe, and that would protect from the ransomware running on the server itself. But we also get, with folder sharing, if you're running Windows 64-bit systems, even if the ransomware is coming from another device and the folder is shared from your machine that has CryptoGuard on it, we'll be able to protect that remote file encryption from happening on your device. And then browser exploits. So one of the things that's interesting about the adversaries is they're moving much more significantly to exploits. And you may be familiar with what's termed a drive-by exploit. And what happens there is the user goes to a website. And this could be a website they've gone to every day for the last year, but now it's been taken over by an adversary. And what the adversary does is from that browser, they can automatically exploit a vulnerability in the browser. The user doesn't have to do anything other than browse to the website. And once that exploit happens, they tend to deliver the malware and it gets written to disk. But we've also seen malware that wants to run in memory only. So this browser protection prevents those types of exploits from happening in the browsers. And then we have a number of the exploit detection capabilities. And that list was everything from the heap sprays and the process hollows and things like that. And you can turn on various models for those.
Hey, Carl.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. That was a good look at what we got, where it's going. Question about, right, and this comes up, is this available only for the endpoint product, the on-prem versus the cloud product? And maybe you could even speak to, right, Sophos Cloud is sometimes referred to now as Sophos Central, right?
Yes.
And so you just kind of clarify that. I think that'd be good to kind of chat about for a minute.
Absolutely. So a few months ago, we renamed Sophos Cloud to Sophos Central. That's all that really changed was the name of the product. So what Sophos Central does is it allows management of a variety of products that are enabled there. The most common one being endpoint, but it could also be your mobile device management or your cloud email gateway. All of those can be managed from Central. What's important when we look at Intercept as a capability, it requires Sophos Central to run. If you have an on-prem managed endpoint today, so you're using the Sophos Enterprise Console, this list of capabilities, you have all of these capabilities except synchronized security. And you're managing that from an on-device management console. The Intercept capabilities will become available for on-prem around December, with the exception of the root cause analytics. So around 3 months from now, there'll be a version of Intercept available that works with the on-prem SEC server and provides the exploit prevention, the CryptoGuard ransomware protection, the exploit prevention, and Sophos Clean. It won't include root cause analytics, and it won't include synchronized security for on-prem.
So is it fair to say that the big picture direction would be you will be offering all the capabilities you would at the endpoint as you would for the cloud version, or is it mostly going to be kind of cloud endpoint is the future? What's the, I don't know,
Yeah, so no, that's a very good question. So the on-prem products continue to get developed, and we add capabilities there. There's no plan for end-of-lifing them. What we're doing, though, is we're taking Sophos Central, the cloud version right now. We leverage Amazon Web Services to host it. What we're going to do is we're going to take that entire product and allow it to run in an appliance or a virtual appliance. So for customers that want an on-prem solution and like the root cause analytics capability and the more modern UI and design paradigm, that will become available for on-prem deployment in your own supplied appliance to run in your own data center. That's a good 18 months out, though. You'll see a beta for that probably Q1, Q2 of 2017. And we'd be happy to have on-prem accounts that are interested in participating in that beta to reach out to us as we make it available.
Okay. All right. Fantastic.
So from a capability, I think some of the other areas where you've seen Sophos do a lot of investment in R&D is what's happening with the XG firewall. An XG firewall is designed to work as a synchronized security product. And some of the detections we have for root cause analytics were actually detections that happen at a firewall. So what's important to note there is if you have Sophos Advanced Endpoint and the XG firewall deployed in your network, you can tell the two devices that the other is present, and now all of a sudden synchronized security gets turned on. And what that allows is if the endpoint thinks it's under attack, where it's detected malware, it can tell the firewall that it's seeing a malware that needs cleanup. And your policy rules that you can set on the firewall can go ahead and isolate it. The other thing that happens is if the firewall sees something that it knows is an attack, it tells the endpoint, and the endpoint will actually do a runtime process analysis of the process that's causing the traffic. And all of this is really enabling a couple of things on the firewall to make sure it can identify the process that's generating the traffic and the machine name and the user, not just an IP address and a protocol. The new versions of the XG firewall as they come out, they're adding a capability around application identity. So often with XG firewalls, some percentage of the traffic for application control is unclassified or is just considered HTTP generic. What we wanted to do was allow an administrator on the firewall to actually get the process information from the endpoint. So that's coming very soon for the XG firewall as well.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, hey, we're coming up against the time we'd asked everybody to show up for today, so we should wrap it up. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to add before we send these guys on their way?
I guess the last thing is some of the early test results we've been seeing with Intercept and the endpoint combined is we're now detecting much more efficiently zero-day unique malware that may have never been seen and never been used against any other organization. We can detect those if it's leveraging an exploit, and we can tell you how it gets in. That's going to result in some improvements in our overall performance, our overall test scores. And then from a performance perspective, adding this data recorder in the root cause analytics, we wanted to make sure we didn't degrade the overall endpoint performance. So as we've built these in, we've made enough optimizations to sort of cover the cost. It keeps us running about the middle of the pack for overall performance, which means basically the end users don't know that AV is running. That's sort of right where we want to be.
Yeah, exactly, right? We need the capabilities, we need the power, but we need to do it as efficient as possible. So, awesome. Well, Carl, thanks so much. Great presentation today, and everybody else who joined the call, thank you. We know you have a lot of stuff going on during the day. The fact that you chose to spend 45 minutes with us means a lot to me. So, thank you for that, and we'll be in touch. If you want to take a look at this or any of our other videos, go to Productive Content on the YouTube channel or come to our website and look under Content, and you will see this and all sorts of Sophos videos and videos about the mid-market. But until then, I am Todd Obert from Productive along with Carl Ackerman of Sophos, wishing you a fantastic balance of your day and week, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.